It is not lost on me that the week I preach on honoring father and mother, my mom is here. She spoke at the women's retreat this past weekend in Naples, and from what I've heard and from what I have read via Twitter, she crushed it. Absolutely crushed it. And when I say crushed it, for those of you who are perhaps a little bit older, I mean that's a good thing, okay? Crushing it's a good thing, all right? But in other words, the reason I point out that she's here is because I have a physical witness here this morning, and it wasn't planned, by the way. Okay, this was not planned. I didn't look at the schedule of my sermons and when she was going to be here, and if I would have known that she was going to be sitting here on the morning that I was preaching this commandment, I would have been tempted to skip it. Or to just sort of go on and on about the one that I did 2 weeks ago. But I have a physical witness here who can testify to my inability to keep this commandment. Not that you had any doubt whatsoever that I was capable of keeping this commandment, but she's here, and she suffered through me and continues to suffer through me in a variety of different ways. But in a twist of irony, what I want to say about my mom right now is honoring. So, give me a few minutes. About 10, 11 years ago, my mom went through a difficult season in life, and I was a brand new church planter in the South Florida area back in 2003, and she was going through a painful, difficult season in life that I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand it because I was a Pharisee. And I was dishonoring to her in my heart. I was dishonoring to her with my mouth. I was dishonoring to her in my mind. I just couldn't understand why this woman who I had always believed was together was in some ways falling apart. And I was judgmental. She had been an idol to me for so long, and I was now face to face with her humanness, and I couldn't understand it. I couldn't comprehend it, and I couldn't comprehend it because I was a self-righteous, law-laden Pharisee. And so this is what I want to say. Mom, your brokenness and your failures have taught me more about grace than any of your put-togetherness ever did. And when I thought you had it all together, as a child and as a teenager, when I thought you had it all together and I knew that I didn't, so many of your words fell on deaf ears to me, because I had developed her in my mind as someone who was flawless, and I knew how flawed I was. She was good, I was bad, and so when she would speak to me, when she would advise me, counsel me, yell at me, it fell on deaf ears. But now I hang on every word you say. I need you, and I depend on you, and my commitment to preach the grace of God to guilty people is in large part because of you. You get it. You get it. And while I'm grateful to you for all the change diapers and hugs and kisses and words of encouragement you gave me growing up, your ministry to me now is so much stronger than it ever was, ever. And sometimes I was thinking about this week, Sometimes we think that being good is the qualifier for us having an effective ministry. That's our natural default mode. That to have an effective, fruitful ministry, goodness is a prerequisite, that it's, in a sense, required, but the truth is that no one is good. And our ministries become effective when we acknowledge our badness and when we live out of our brokenness, and that's what you do. You were paid probably the best compliment, in my opinion, that could be paid. Yesterday, as I got a text message from Hope, my niece, who said, Mama G is just killing it. Mama G is what we call her, what her grandchildren, her 19 grandchildren call her. And she said, Hope said, this may be the best speaker we've ever had. She said, she reminds me so much of Steve Brown. Minus the voice. Older, honest, broken, transparent, and pointing to Jesus. And I can only hope that as I get older, as we get older, and guys, I've said this 1,000 times, that is the definition, the biblical definition of Christian growth. It's not what they told us it was. It's not, I'm getting stronger and stronger and more competent every day so that I need Jesus less now than I did when God first saved me. That's not Christian growth. Christian growth is, as I get older and become wiser, I become increasingly aware of how weak and incompetent I am and how strong and competent Jesus is and continues to be for me. That's Christian growth. That's the way it's described. That's the way Paul describes it. And so the truth is that if you're afraid to let anyone see your badness, it reveals just how much you've built your identity on appearing to be good. Okay, think about that for a second. If you're afraid to let anyone see your badness, what it reveals is that we have built our identity on the appearance of being good. What if people knew your secrets? And what if people saw you without your mask on? What if those closest to you knew what you really thought about them in those dark moments? What if everyone saw precisely what you did in secret? All of those sorts of things. It reveals to me and to the rest of us that if we are afraid to let anyone see our badness, it shows just how much we have built our identity on the appearance of goodness. So, Mom, you're honest because you're free, and you're free because you don't pretend that you have it all together. And you don't pretend that you have it all together because you understand that who you are is not anchored in what you do or who other people think you are. It's anchored in what Jesus has done for you. So I love you, I honor you, and I am forever grateful that you are a struggler and a lover of God's grace. And that has taught me more about who I am and who God is and the radicality of his one-way love than anything you ever said to me. So thank you. Love you. Now, I should just pray and be done. But since the Cowboys don't play until tomorrow night, I'm going to keep you guys just a little bit longer, all right? So let's talk about this commandment for a few minutes. To honor someone is to put them ahead of yourself, to consider them before you consider yourself. To honor someone means that you subject yourself to them in a way that puts them above you. In a sense, to honor someone really means to disappear in the shadow of someone else. Okay, that's what it really means to honor someone. And when we put it like that, when we understand what it means to honor someone in that light, it should show you and I how often we fail at keeping this command, not only with our parents, but with just about everybody. Now, this command, let me point this out too. This command has little to do with whether our parents or anyone else for that matter is honorable. Doesn't say that. Okay? Because I know some of your stories, and I know some of the ways that you all grew up and the parents that you had to deal with. And so it's easy to read this commandment and say, well, this is for the people with good parents. This is for those people who had parents that loved them and sacrificed for them. This is for people who had honorable parents. But you don't know my mom and dad. You don't know the abuse that I suffered. You don't know what I had to endure. You don't know what, as a grown man or woman, I continue to endure because of the oppression of my mother or the oppression of my father. And we could say that about anybody. Well, okay, honoring means to put someone above yourself and to consider someone else before you consider yourself and that sort of thing. And if that's the standard, then we could look around and say, is anybody honorable? Is anybody deserving of honor? And the answer, of course, is no. No one is deserving of honor. No one, when we understand it in that light, is honorable. So this command has little to do with whether our parents or anyone else for that matter is honorable. This is intended to expose our propensity to honor ourselves. That's what it's intended to do first. It's intended to expose our propensity to honor ourselves, because what comes natural to us is to fight for our rights. What comes natural to us is to clamor for credit. What comes natural to us is to put ourselves first. We think first about what we need. We think first about what we want. We think first about what others should do for us. We crave recognition. We crave reward. We crave respect. So much of our own sense of worth and value depends on our getting recognition, on our getting respect, on our being rewarded for what we do and for who people think we are. But as you and I know, this leads to slavery. You and I know that this kind of approach to life, extracting things from other people that we think we need in order to feel like we matter, in order for our existence to be justified, that makes life heavy. It leads to slavery. I mean, fighting to be noticed, fighting to be appreciated, fighting to be loved, fighting to be affirmed, fighting to be honored, makes life wearisome. It's a burden that we place on our own shoulders, needing our opinions to win the day, our thoughts and our actions to carry the room, our reputations to get us ahead, our looks and our personalities to get us love. All of these things burden us. All of these things make life heavy. They enslave us. Because even though we might live the kind of life that we think deserves recognition and honor, we can't control whether or not people love us. And it's sort of a fool's game to think that we can find life and meaning and significance and freedom if we can get honor, if we can get love, if we can get recognition, if we can get credit. If the people around us listen to us and think about what we say and believe that we're smart and we're wise and all of those things, if our colleagues respect our work ethic and think that we're successful, if all of these things, it's sort of a fool's errand, because even though we might strive and work our entire lives to become something of note, we can't control whether or not other people will actually give us what we think we deserve. We can't control it. So, we might do an amazing job, but we can't control whether other people think it's amazing. And even if they think it's amazing, we can't control whether or not they feel threatened by our work and accomplishments. Sometimes the more successful we are, the more enemies we make because people get jealous. Like us, they're too busy trying to get honor for themselves, so they can't give honor to you. And so you spend your life on this performance treadmill, this treadmill of performance, trying to become something of recognition. But there's no way you can control whether or not other people will give you the recognition you think you deserve. And even if they recognize some accomplishment, or even if they recognize at some level that you're successful or that you're wise, you can't control whether or not they honor you for that. They might actually feel threatened by that and dishonor you. You fight to become an honorable mother, but the mom who feels like a failure runs from you because she feels guilty. You clamor to become honorable in your profession, but your colleagues and your competitors try to dishonor you because they see you as a threat. So the promise of life, if we can get love and get respect and get credit and get honor, is a false promise. And too many of us live our lives believing this promise and finding ourselves weary and heavy laden, one more bankrupt attempt to save ourselves. And so we are inescapably addicted to getting honor. We're inescapably addicted to it. All of our failures in deep and detailed ways can be traced back to the original failure of Adam and Eve, perfectly representing us. What was going on in the Garden of Eden? There was some sense in which they desired independence. Why give honor when I can get it? Why be dependent when I can be independent? Why give credit when I can take credit? Why subject myself to someone else when I can be my own boss, be my own authority? Why? And then that gets passed down and worked out in 1,000 deep and different experiential and existential ways that reveal just how broken we are, just how turned into ourselves we are, which is Martin Luther's definition of sin: mankind turned in on himself. Wanting, craving, seeking our entire lives to get what can only be freely given by one who is honorable, by the only one who actually deserves honor. Trying to achieve honorable status is almost a guarantee that you will not get it. So, in other words, what blocks us from honoring our parents or anyone else is our inescapable addiction to honoring ourselves. Inescapable. You do it, I do it. I've said this before, and it's embarrassing to admit, but I've told you this on numerous occasions, that one of the reasons I work so hard to prepare sermons so that I can stand up on Sunday and preach those sermons is because at some sick level, I need you to think I'm a good preacher if I'm going to feel like I matter. Okay? Now, that might not be your problem because you're not a preacher. Your life is easy, okay? I'm just kidding. Totally kidding, okay? Many of you have told me about your lives, and I'd gladly take mine over yours. Seriously, I might not be your problem, but that is your problem. Your problem might not be wanting to preach a good sermon so people think you're a good preacher, but maybe it's wanting to make sure my kids turn out okay so that I can think of myself as a good mother. Wanting my son to be successful so that I can think of myself as a good father. Maybe it's, wanting to climb the corporate ladder so that other people in my industry will respect me, and they will see me and think that I am successful, and I'll get the respect that I long for. Maybe it is I will beat my body to a pulp so that I can look good, because if I can look good, maybe I'll get the love that I crave. I mean, there are 1,000 different ways in which this clamoring for credit, this addiction to self-congratulations and honor works itself out. In 1,000 deep ways. Deep sort of existential, emotional, psychological, mental, spiritual ways. Oftentimes, Christian people will do this with God. They'll do this with God. They will organize their lives in such a way as to getting God's attention, and believing that if they can just clean up their act, if they can get good, if they can keep the rules, then maybe God will love them and accept them and approve of them. I've said this before, but we may say, just as for the theologians out there, we may say that justification precedes sanctification. But the way most of us live is as if sanctification precedes justification. If we can work hard, and if we can get clean, and if we can be good, then I will be justified. Then God will love me. Then God will accept me. Then God will approve of me fully and finally. But we know that this is a dead end. It's a dead end with God. It's a dead end with one another. We keep trying because, as I've said, we're addicted to our own self-salvation projects, and so we keep trying. This is our natural default mode, but it is an inescapable problem that we have. But here's some good news, okay? Once again, what we find ourselves incapable of doing, or at least doing perfectly, God has done for us. That's the good news. My friend David Zoll wrote an amazing piece on the Mockingbird website, mbird.com. Okay, you should visit 3 websites, okay, on a daily basis. Liberate.org, okay, mbird.com, and dallascowboys.com, okay? Those are the 3 websites. And listen, the reason you should visit dallascowboys.com is simply because, what is that? Is that a song that we're singing later, Zach? Yeah, it is. Is it? Should I start singing it now? Okay, yeah, thank you. I think that's like quit, let's get to the last song. Would you stop talking? I think that's what that meant. The reason you should visit dallascowboys.com is because if you love your pastor, then you should know something about him. You should know what he loves. You should know what he appreciates. You should know what his idols are. So visit dallascowboys.com. But David Zoll, my good friend and who I call my theological soulmate, David Zoll, who if you've come to Liberate, you've heard him each year. He's amazing. Wrote a piece on the Mockingbird website, which is a ministry he started. And it's an amazing, amazing piece. I think it was printed on October 22nd, which is about 3 or 4 days ago. But this was the line that caught my attention. Our hope, this is so good, so Zollian. Our hope is not found in the passing of tests, but in the forgiveness of failure. Just think about that for a second. And then think about how we live our lives. Our hope is not found in the passing of tests, but in the forgiveness of failure. By the sheer grace of God, he says, the test to end all tests has already been taken and scored perfectly. 10 out of 10. How do we live our lives? How do I live my life? I live my life as if, even though I would never necessarily put it this way. I live my life as if my hope is found in the passing of tests. The tests that society puts on my shoulders, the tests that others put on my shoulders, the tests that I put on my own shoulders, the tests that I believe God puts on my shoulders, and I find myself believing, at least functionally, if not theologically or intellectually, functionally I find myself believing that our hope is found in the passing of tests, but it's not. It's found in the forgiveness of failure. By the sheer grace of God, the test to end all tests has already been taken and scored perfectly. So, once again, what we find ourselves incapable of doing, or at the very least doing imperfectly. Okay, you might literally, I thought about this yesterday, and I said, well, some people might be sitting here this morning and going, well, of course you're capable of keeping this command. You just honored your mother in front of everybody. Okay, I mean, you're contradicting yourself. Well, yes, in a sense, but the requirement from God is that this is something that we keep perfectly. So, in the first 10 minutes I was talking, did I honor my mother perfectly? Of course not. For a host of reasons. Number one, there's a lot more that I could say that I didn't say. A lot more good things that I could have said that I didn't say. For another reason, I know my motives are mixed. You know, I'm a sinner. I remember when a couple came to me one time and said, Pastor, we are considering a big transition in our life, whether or not to move and take this other job, and we're not exactly sure what to do, but we're coming to you because we want to make sure our motives are pure. And I just said, you don't have to even tell me anything about your decision. I can tell you right now before we even start. Of course your motives aren't pure. I mean, and that's not a knock on you. I'm saying we're sinners. Okay, there's no such thing as an absolutely pure, infallible, blemish-free motive inside a sinner. There's not, okay? And so, I don't know, my motives were mixed, probably. I'm not probably, they were. I don't know what my bad motives were, but I know there was probably some messed upness mixed in there as I was saying those very things. You know, I don't know, maybe my mom will like me more if I say something nice about her in public. I don't know. Maybe you guys will think I'm a sweet, soft, wonderful guy for saying something. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is we can't keep this perfectly, and that's what God requires. And so when we find ourselves, what we find here, once again, is our incapability of doing, or at least doing perfectly, something God requires, but the one who makes the demand for perfection also meets the demand for perfection on our behalf. At every point where we failed, Jesus succeeded for us, and this commandment is no exception. If you just think about his life, think about his arrival, the arrival of Jesus. God in the flesh, taking on human flesh and frailty to honor his Father by assembling, calling together a family for God's good pleasure. At every point in his life, he honored his Father. We've already discussed Jesus' respect and honor for God during his temptation in the wilderness, in the Garden of Gethsemane, the night he was betrayed, when he was begging the Father to find another way, to find some other way to make this rescue happen. And he concluded his prayer by saying, "Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done." He was always subjecting himself to his Father, always honoring his Father, in a sense, always living in the shadow of his Father. Always, at every point in his life, where we fail to honor our parents and one another perfectly, Jesus perfectly honored his Father in our place. He puts his Father before himself at all times and in every way. He did not come to abolish this or any other law. He came to fulfill it. And as a result of his perfect record being credited to us, we are now free. Free from the need to get honor and free to honor one another. He did not come to abolish the law, he came to fulfill it. And that means something for you and me here and now. It doesn't mean that we leave here today and go, lay on the couch from now until the day we die. Okay, that is a huge misconception when it comes to the understanding of it is finished. It is finished sets us free. It sets us free from needing anything ourselves. And it sets us free to give everything because we need nothing. And this is remarkable freedom because now the heaviness of life that accompanies the pressure I put on myself to save myself by getting honor, by getting credit, by getting recognition, by getting affirmation, by getting approval, that burden's been lifted. It's been lifted because I already have all of the approval, all of the acceptance, all of the love, all of the honor that I crave. I already have it because Jesus has secured it for me and given it to me before God. So now I don't need it. So now I'm actually free to celebrate you, to honor you, to give credit to you. You are not deserving of honor. None of us are. We're not honorable. But I'm free now to be deferential. I'm free to not need anything for myself because all of the honor we crave has been deposited in our account. We are loved and accepted by God forever. We can now celebrate the success of others, consider other people's ideas and opinions as being better than ours. We no longer have to win, get ahead, be noticed, seek recognition. We're free to disappear. We're free to forget ourselves. Isn't that counterintuitive? So counterintuitive. The way the world defines freedom is to get honor. Get honor, get recognition, get affirmation, and you'll be free. But the way the Bible describes honor in the economy of the gospel, the way the Bible describes freedom, not honor, the way the Bible describes freedom is I'm fully loved, fully approved. I am recognized by God the Father because of the work of God the Son. I am fully recognized. And therefore, I am free from the need for recognition. I'm free from the pressure to get honor. I don't have to win. I don't have to get ahead. I don't have to be noticed. I'm free to forget myself. I'm free to forget myself. I'm free to disappear into and under the shadow of what Jesus has done for me. As I mentioned a few weeks ago, what this means is that we can now live from love rather than for it. We can now live from approval rather than for approval. That changes the trajectory of your life, both externally and internally. I can now live from acceptance and not for it. And while that is amazing good news, the good news in this verse doesn't end there. Notice what it says. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. There's a condition there, isn't there? You want to live long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you? Well, that's simple. Just honor your father and mother. Just honor your father and mother and then you'll get the goods. Okay, you'll be able to live long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. This is the good news. Jesus met all of God's holy conditions for us so that our relationship to God could be wholly unconditional. And what that means is that the best part about this verse is that everything I've described up until now about the freedom that we have been given because of Christ's fulfillment of the law on our behalf, this is just the beginning of this freedom. There is a fuller freedom yet to be experienced. Because Jesus honored his Father for us, we are guaranteed long life in the land to come. It is our inheritance as sons and daughters of God who have done nothing to deserve the goods that are coming our way. A land where there will be no more tears, no more tension, no more cancer, no more broken hearts, no more bad habits, no more unfulfilled longings. All of that stuff will be wiped away. And we will work and worship in a way that will feel freer than anything you've ever experienced in your life. So for those who have been pardoned by God, the best is yet to come. You are not living your best life now. Trust me, okay? You're not. But the promise is that the best is yet to come. The best is yet to come because we get to experience the beginnings of our loosening of chains. And we feel them falling off. And we find ourselves, as life goes on, getting better in the sense of forgetting ourselves and understanding our desperation at deeper levels and growing in our appreciation for Jesus and his finished work. And what that does inside of us is it makes us want to give rather than take. But that's just the beginning, because we'll always still be takers. Until the day we die or the day Jesus comes back, we're still going to struggle like Paul in Romans 7. I know what freedom looks like. I've tasted it at times, but I keep going back into my cage. I keep falling back into these habits and into these mindsets that keep me in bondage. And then I experience, it's like the children of Israel, you know? They would get themselves into a jam. They would cry out to God for help. God would come and deliver them. And the moment they felt free and delivered, they would go right back. And then they would cry out to God again. Help, help, help. And God would come and deliver them again. And the moment they felt free and delivered, they would go right back. And over and over and over and over again. Which is such a great, beautiful demonstration of God's love for us. That we cannot out-sin the coverage of God's forgiveness. We can't do it. And yet we find ourselves living in the same kind of tension. We find ourselves tied up in knots. We find ourselves feeling the pressure and the bondage. And we revert right back to our self-salvation projects where we depend on ourselves and our efforts rather than Christ and his effort on our behalf. And then we cry out to God. We find ourselves all messed up again, and we cry out to God for help, and he comes and he helps us, and he gives us a fresh sense of who Jesus is and continues to be for us. He gives us a fresh sense of Christ's substitution. Well, may the accuser roar of sins that I have done. I know them all and thousands more. Jehovah knoweth none. And when we sing it and when we hear it, we feel free again. And then the next day or the next hour, we fall right back. And we're constantly, the rhythm of the Christian life is death and resurrection. It's not just one-time death, one-time resurrection. It's death and resurrection. Death and resurrection. All day, every day. But that will come to an end. That grueling process of death and resurrection will come to an end one day. When we are resurrected fully and finally, the land that was promised and secured for us will be ours forever. And you will not have to deal with sin and selfishness and disease and miscarriages and frustrations and tensions and difficulties and pain and sorrow and loss and brokenheartedness and unfulfilled longings, unmet expectations. All of those things that make life hard and heavy will be eliminated forever. Why? Because God, in the person of Jesus, honored his Father perfectly on behalf of dishonorable people like you and me.